So moving on to talk about this college football playoff bracket. We're gonna go through our brackets. We're gonna do a little so every team 1 through 12 that we seed correctly will get a point. We'll talk about this once the bracket comes out. We're not gonna go through and predict the games. We're just gonna predict the bracket and the matchups and talk about maybe some chaos scenarios. I'll start it up here. We'll just go 1 through 12, predicting who the one seed is. My one seed is going to be Oregon after they beat Penn State. What do you got?
My one seed's also going to be Oregon after they beat Penn State in the Big 12 or
I
Big Ten championship.
believe that is the only thing we have in common here.
At least in the top four, yeah, for sure. But
All right. My two is Georgia.
and my two is Texas.
Yeah, see, there's a difference. Georgia beat Texas in Texas. This game now in Atlanta for neutral site SEC championship, but it's um, really a Georgia home game. So that's why I'm going Georgia.
Yeah, it is pretty much
Going
a home
Texas
game.
get back.
I do think that Texas is if if Georgia plays the way they played early in the season against Texas, then yeah, you're right. Georgia's gonna win. But Georgia to me has just been too inconsistent. Like Carson Beck cannot keep control of the football. Carson Beck has regressed significantly this season since he lost his wide receivers and Brock Bowers in the draft. Significantly worse. Their defense is still good, but Carson Beck just isn't as good. So I see him struggling if he continues to play the way he's been playing. So that's why I have Texas winning. They also want to get their get back on him
Yeah.
and first year in the SEC, so maybe they'll try a little harder. I don't really know, but
See,
uh,
this is where I have my first issue with the ESPN playoff predictor here. They give Georgia a 99% chance to make the playoff. They give Texas greater than a 99% chance. Um, but if Georgia loses this game, I think they still make the playoff, but they could drop anywhere. They could almost drop all the way to 11 because they'll be a three-loss team. So you'll have to have teams like Ohio State ahead of them, Tennessee ahead of them. Uh, even though Tennessee lost to Georgia, but the overall loss record thing, um, Indiana will have to be ahead of them. Notre Dame will have to be ahead of them, and even if SMU as a at large, if they lose to Clemson, looks their resume, they got less losses. So we'll see how the committee would view that. So I think Georgia needs
yeah,
this game more than
yeah, and we'll see that with mine further down because I have Georgia losing. I do think we'll get to that. We'll bite that that bullet when we get there. We'll talk about that when
yeah.
we get there. But
All
yeah,
right,
a little bit.
my three is gonna be Boise State. Who do you got?
My three is Arizona State.
Very
I
interesting.
think Arizona State. You'll see this. I kind of have to go a little bit ahead of time to explain, but I just don't. I think
Yep, we know where. I think everybody knows where you're going with that pick.
yeah. So that's that. So I think Arizona State beats Iowa State, and then because if you look at all the conference championships outside of the SEC and Big Ten, Arizona State's going to be the highest ranked winner. So that's why I'm putting them at three.
All right, moving on to four. This is my Big 12 team. I'm taking Iowa State here. What do you got?
For four, I am taking Clemson.
So quite the chaos we got in these brackets so far, which it would be entertaining to see. So this means both of us have SMU losing by
Hmm.
that. It doesn't necessarily mean we both have SMU out.
Right.
Moving on, we're gonna go 12 because that's the last conference champion. Um, my 12 seed is Clemson after they beat SMU. Connor, who you got?
My 12 seed is going to be UNLV after beating Boise State. And that's where I've been at. I've said it
That
all
sets up
year.
into that sets up into the 12 5 game being. I think this is one we also agree on. Our 5 seed is Notre Dame, right?
Yeah,
Both
Notre Dame's locked in as a five seed, I think, no matter what,
unless Oregon
unless
loses.
Penn State, if Penn State beats Oregon, that's the only way Notre Dame's a six seed. So any other way, as long as Oregon wins, Notre Dame's five seed, it doesn't matter. So yeah, that's a lock at five.
All right, moving on to six. I know we disagree here. I have Texas
I
after they
have
lose to Georgia.
I have Penn State at six. After losing to Oregon, I think they're going to drop. Right now, they're three. I don't think you drop too much after losing to Oregon. So I'm going to have them six. They'll be behind Notre Dame, but they'll still be ahead of the rest of the pack.
All right, moving into the seven. We'll just go this way. This is where I have Penn State after they lose.
Yeah, at seven, I have Tennessee. I have Tennessee at seven. Um, I would put Penn State lower. I don't know if I'm a hater or not, but I just don't think Penn State's a true like 3 seed right now. They're not bad, but they're just not great. So it kind of sucks having them that high, but I'm gonna put them at 6 'cause I think that's where the committee will put them if they lose to Oregon. And then
Yeah,
Tennessee at 7 because
yeah,
Tennessee has no games left. They're locked in wherever they
yeah.
are.
They're kind of just they're same as Notre Dame, just
Yeah, they're
slightly
in the same
different.
spot as Notre Dame. They're where they are. The only thing that can change is what's around them, but they're gonna be anywhere between like um 8 and 7.
Yeah, yeah. I have that's where I have them. I have them at 8.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think they get the boost ahead of Ohio State to give away my 9 there, just because the recency bias.
That's my
Um,
that's why my 8 is Ohio
yeah.
State. I have Tennessee at 7 and Ohio State at 8.
Who you have at 9?
At 9, I have Georgia, which is where it gets a little hairy. It's
Which
where
is see, I have the team that could be potentially higher screen these off would be Indiana. And I think the committee is just going to be like, these are the teams. I think they're kind of going to pick the matchups that we'd prefer to see. So that sets up my 10 being Indiana. Who you have at your 10? Are you,
my 10 is also Indiana.
yeah. Yeah. So just putting Georgia ahead of them, just I think it's tough to punish the team that lost the conference championship game. But like I said earlier, that'll be interesting to see if Georgia loses, how far do they fall? Because now
Yeah.
their resume isn't as good, but they play an extra game compared to Indiana, compared to Ohio State. So that'll be interesting. So that sets up my 5-12 is Notre Dame and Clemson. Your 5-12 is Notre Dame and UNLV.
Yeah.
Um, my 7-10 is uh, this was Penn State hosting Indiana. So a conference game that we didn't see this year. And
Yeah.
then my 8-9 was Tennessee hosting Ohio State.
Yeah. And then 6 and 11. We didn't even talk about 11, I don't
Yeah,
think.
yeah. What was your 7-10 game was what?
My 7-10 game is Tennessee and Indiana. And then my 8-9 game is Ohio State, Georgia, which would be a really good game.
That would be so we agree on that one. Just you have Ohio State 8, right? Or no, 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 I'm sorry. My I had Ohio State and Tennessee, not Ohio State, Georgia. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have Ohio State at 8 and then Georgia at 9. So
And
it'd
then
be Ohio State at home in
the
Columbus.
final the final seed we have, this is the one that really can go so many directions, that 11 seed.
Yeah.
Um, I would have this 11 seed playing at Texas after Texas loses to Georgia. Um, I have it. I think I'm gonna guess SMU. I
Hmm.
think that'd be cool if SMU played at Texas in the
That would
playoff.
be, it would.
But this is the one that it could be Bama, who's not doing anything this week. It could be Miami after their loss. It could be South Carolina, which would be cool because they kind of come in on a heater. But it could be even like in your bracket, it could be Boise still if Boise loses to UNLV.
Yeah, it could.
Um,
The only thing is I don't know. I
who's
don't think
who's yours? I didn't I didn't,
that.
didn't get that.
My 11 is SMU. I don't think the committee would put Boise in if Boise loses. I think Boise is not even Boise. Boise actually, if anything, is one of those unique teams that could still make it in if they lose. But I think at least for a while, if a G5 team
Yeah, you
doesn't
have to win it.
they're not going to make it unless they win their conference championship. Like that's the
Yeah,
only way G5
yeah.
teams can make it. And Boise State's the most respectable group of 5 team we're probably going to see in quite some time. They have a singular loss. It was by 3 to Oregon. Now it wasn't the same Oregon that we're seeing now, but it was Oregon, and in Oregon. So it was one of those games where it's like they
Yeah, they
barely,
get credit for that.
you got to give them a lot of credit for that loss. So Boise State, but then the rest of their schedule, it's a group of 5 schedule. So like they don't play anybody crazy. Um, but like if you look at Army, for example, Army, their strength of schedule is trash, but their only loss is to number 5, what we're guessing, number 5 Notre Dame, and they're not even in the conversation anymore because they lost to Notre Dame. And they could be a ranked Tulane in their conference championship. So you have to win your conference championship and you have to be high ranked to make it as a group of 5 team, in my opinion. So that's why I think if Boise loses, they're out.
Yeah, see, my only request, it could be I was between Bama and SMU for that spot, and but I think if Clemson wins, like say walk off field goal or walk off touchdown, like that Bama Clemson national championship game,
Yeah.
um, then I think SMU would deserve it. But if Clemson kills them,
Yeah.
uh, then maybe then it goes to Bama or even Miami.
Mhm.
Um, but the one request I have is that if whoever the six is, and I know I did my 8-9 was a conference game, or my 7-10 was a conference game, but at least it was teams that didn't play this year. I because this is kind of the ones where the like 6-11 is more controlled by the committee, like that 11 seed, where the 7-10 game is kind of just the teams that are at idle in whatever form, like 7 through 10, like even including 8-9. Those are kind of just the teams that are at idle this week.
Mhm.
Uh, or the teams that lose the conference championship, but they're like pretty much locked in anyway. Like the playoff predictor has Notre Dame, Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Georgia, Indiana, Tennessee, and Ohio State all above 96% chances to make the playoff. So these guys like whatever order they're in, but the ones like 11 and 12, or I guess not 12, but 11 and even 10 a little bit, committee kind of gets to choose the matchup there. I just
Yeah.
hope we can avoid any rematches in the first round and preferably no conference matchups. I really want to see these teams play teams they haven't played. Because then like all the who's better, the SEC or the Big Ten, then we can actually see them play each other. Like if we get say Indiana and Georgia in the first round, and everybody's yelling about Indiana's schedule, and Indiana beats Georgia, then it's like all right, all that goes away. You guys can't talk anymore. Or if Clemson gets in and they go on a run, or SMU's the 11 and they beat six-seeded Texas at Texas, like in my little bracket, then as you can't say anything about the conference anymore because they would have done what you have to do and win the playoff games.
Yeah, no, I think the playoffs, especially if it's done right, will silence a lot. But the way it won't silence anything is if they make it
If they make
conference
it tough,
play. Yeah, because I think a lot of the I don't want to say the argument, but there's like a lot of if you look at college football as a whole, there's people who have their conference. Like you are a big ACC guy. Now I am a big ACC hater. Like I'm like, no.
and that's
And
part of
then
why I'm an ACC fan. I like to mess with
exactly.
them.
And then I'm like a biased SEC fan. And then
Yep.
there's Big Ten fans who are
Yeah,
like
we got two of our
pro.
other friends are big Big Ten supporters.
Yeah,
They're all
so
delusional.
Big Ten guys sit there and they go, "Oh, we're the best conference in football," and then it's like,
They
well,
the Big Ten especially bothers me because they like go out of their way to not schedule anybody.
yeah,
Like the
exactly, yeah, and
SEC
then
will play the ACC, they'll play the Big 12.
yep,
They like Clemson played Georgia week 1. Georgia just played Georgia Tech in a good game, and then there's the Big 10 that's just like nope. Our only major non-conference game, we went and added that team to our conference, and that was Ohio State versus Oregon because that was going to get played anyway. But then they went and put Oregon in the conference, so it didn't matter. So
Big
Ohio
Ten
State's
non-con
non-conference
games
was
are MAC games.
absolute garbage.
Yeah, they're all MAC. They're the Big Ten plays MAC teams in the
Yeah,
non-conference games.
your major rivalry, for the most part, in my opinion, shouldn't be a conference game. Like Georgia Tech is great. Clemson versus South Carolina is great. Notre Dame versus USC this week is great. Like if it's a conference game, it shouldn't be like it can be a rivalry in the middle of the season, but not this part of the season. Like Iowa and Iowa State, I know they played beginning of the year, but that'd be a good matchup this week. Like
Yeah,
the like closest team. Like I know Penn State or Ohio State and Michigan kind of have to play this week, and that's fair. But like schedule like when Ohio State plays Notre Dame, that's great.
yeah,
This year they
that's
haven't.
becoming a better rivalry. I'd love to play Ohio State like as a Notre Dame fan because we just we've had a couple games. We did like a home and home with them, and we lost both.
I
And
believe.
one we shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
it's
believe
just like
next year
that's
Ohio
a
State
huge
has
thing.
Texas next year. They have a home and home the next couple of years, so that's at
Yeah,
least something.
yeah,
But
that's something. But I mean, you can make that argument with everybody. Like, I mean, I don't like the Big Ten, and I think their schedules are easy. And if you look at the Big Ten as a whole, there's three teams, and then there's nobody, and they just play each other. Whereas the SEC is like they play like the whole SEC is just better. Like if you look at top to
yeah,
bottom, you look at the SEC, I think there's more good teams than in the Big Ten. But that's an argument for a different day. We'll debate that some other day.
that's
But
the argument I made. Like obviously not compared to the SEC, but everybody like you specifically, you trash on the ACC. But then we've seen a couple times now the ACC teams have hanged with uh,
yes, that
hung
is true.
around with some of these bigger
That
teams.
is true. But like that's also low key my argument with the ACC is you got Clemson every single year, Miami this year, normally Florida State, and then you'll have like a couple teams that shock the world like Georgia Tech this year,
Yeah,
but they're not they're if you look at Georgia Tech overall, like what they're 8-4, so it's
Seven
like
and five because they end up losing.
oh they're seven and, oh yeah, so they're seven and
Lost.
five. So like they played really well. They played good against good teams, but they're still 7-5. And then like you have nobody else. Like Louisville kind of
Well,
they played well in conference play,
Florida
but then like
State's supposed to not be garbage. They're supposed to be in there, and then you have a handful of like if
like
Florida State
you
was
got
what we
one
expected, we would have had 3 to 4 teams competing for the playoff.
yeah, like I will say that this year the teams weren't as good as they should have been. And also you guys had like Boston College wasn't as bad as they were supposed to be. They ended up being pretty shit, but like
See,
this year
that's
got
that's
stronger.
my argument was that we got teams that are like they're bad, but they're better than the bad
Pitt,
of the other
Pitt,
conference.
Pitt was supposed to be pretty mid this year, and they
It
ended
was
up
they,
like
they
what seven.
started, but they tanked at the end a
Yeah,
little
they
bit.
tanked at the end, and then you got like UNC is garbage.
That's always my argument is they
Trash.
always because I think the 7 year run, Clemson won 7 straight ACC championships, and they were all against 7 different teams. And I mean, it's like, well, there's nobody good that they go against because they always win the conference easily. But it's like you got to give credit to the competitiveness in the conference, even though it's a dominant winner,
Yeah,
but
I
everybody
do
else
like
is
that. I do
getting
like
for a
that.
shot. So when
Yeah.
like you look at the standings and it's always like everybody's like 5-3. Like Syracuse is 5-3. They just had a big win, but
Mhm.
these teams are all they're good. Like I always think the 5-3 Syracuse could compete with who's your 5-3 or 4-4 team in the SEC.
Like Vandy.
Syracuse and South Carolina played in the bowl game. I think that'd be a
I mean, I think South Carolina beat the shit
I
out of
think
them.
South Carolina. I think it'd be close, but
I
South.
think if you
Leave
compare
the,
them
the
to Vandy, like Vandy is that
yes, Vandy's a good. Well, not historically, but this year, yeah.
yeah, this year. Like that's a fair comparison. But like that's in my opinion, like that's why I like the Big 12. The Big 12 has been that this year. They beat each other up, like they might not have like that team where you're like, whoa, that's a good team, like Clemson in the ACC
Yeah,
or
Big 12 and the ACC are very similar.
yeah, but they play each other hard. And then that's the SEC this year. Like the SEC doesn't have their, you know, two undefeated teams like they normally do, but there's a lot of good teams in the SEC. I don't think Ole Miss is good, but people say Ole Miss is good. You got
Yeah,
South Carolina, you got Texas A&M, you got Texas, you have
Florida
Alabama,
was
you
better.
have Georgia, Tennessee. Like that's 8 good teams in a conference. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like good teams. That's 8 top 20 teams in a singular conference.
Miami, Miami and Florida played earlier this year. Just to go back to the conference playing each other.
Yeah, Miami beat the shit out of Florida. Florida turned
That
it around
was, that
though.
was
Florida
tough.
had a better end.
If they played again, that'd be a good game.
Yeah, I think if Florida now played Miami now, it'd be a better game. But at the time, Miami destroyed. And then that's another thing. Like, you go, that's the argument between people is like, oh, you look at the conference games, which is fair. But like, in my opinion, you can't look at a Miami Florida game week 1 and compare it to like a Tennessee Florida game where it's
Oh, yeah, the different
oh, the
quarterbacks.
game's gonna be close. It's
I think
mid-season.
people
It's
like
an
for
intense
Florida
rivalry.
specifically, we're not comparing Florida games to Florida games, but they do that like with other teams.
Yeah, like you can't
Someone
you
was
can't
saying, "Oh,
compare
Georgia
that.
Tech." I think that it was talking about Georgia Tech. They had top like 3 top 10 wins or something, and this would have been 4, or this would have been 3 if they beat Georgia. But the one was Florida State's. Like you can't really
Yeah,
can we,
exactly.
give that, can we really count it? They're one in
No, you can.
whatever.
Like but that's the thing. Like people do that. Like especially if they're vouching for their team. Like I'll go on Twitter, bro,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
got these people who are just like, "Oh my God," like they're flaunting something and it's like, "Bro, sit down. You're fucking one of your top 10 wins was literally against Florida State. Like not Georgia Tech. I don't hate Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's fine, but like I think Boston College can make the same argument, right? Like they beat a ranked Florida State, correct?
Yes, they beat them week 2.
Yeah, exactly. And they were still actually a top 10 team because the ranking didn't change.
Yeah,
Um,
they dropped to like from like 3 to 9 or something, or 3 to 10, I think,
yeah,
after week 2.
exactly. So, like, you can make that argument, but they're two different teams. And then, like, even if you look at a team week 1 or week 2 or week 3 and you compare them to week 12, it's like two totally
Yeah,
different
because
teams.
you're supposed to get better, which is why I like the case for South Carolina to get in the playoff because they're coming in on a 6 game win streak,
Yeah.
where
So
Miami would
Arizona
be
State, yeah. I mean,
if
Arizona
Miami
State is
sneaks in off a loss or SMU sneaks in after losing to Clemson, they'd be coming in off a loss where South Carolina or even Bama, like South Carolina should be ahead of Bama because South Carolina's hot and
yeah,
Bama.
Bama shouldn't even be in that shit. That pisses me off that Bama's in the conversation. They're in the conversation because they're Bama and they beat Georgia. But if you look at Bama's losses, they should not be considered. They just lost to Oklahoma. They just got throttled by Oklahoma.
Yeah, like
Oklahoma is not
you
good.
can't get in after that.
Yeah, and then they lost to Vandy, and when it happened, we were like, "Whoa, like maybe this Vandy's different." And then Vandy, they turned out to be Vandy. Like
Yes, yes,
they
they did.
lost to Texas. They played close to Texas. They actually lost more by, they lost, Tennessee beat Vandy by more than Texas did. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But like Vandy, everybody was like, okay, maybe Vandy is something this year. Maybe it's not Alabama. I mean, it was a bad loss, but like maybe Vandy's just different. No, it was Bama. Bama lost to Vandy. Bama
Bama
lost
just
to
he would
Oklahoma.
just take games off, it seemed like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what Georgia's doing, but Georgia's not losing by doing it. Like that's their Ole Miss game. They took it off because Ole Miss
Right.
is not that good. Like Ole Miss is not that good.
All right,
And
we'll have to continue this rant once we
yeah,
get these rankings officially run through our full brackets. Maybe we'll let us know in the comments, guys, if you we can maybe bring in somebody else and have a three-way discussion. Because we got
yes,
me representing the ACC teams, Connor, SEC, and maybe we can get a somebody to help out the Big Ten and we'll make some bracket predictions. But
yeah. This does
that'll
this
wrap
does
up
open up
episode
a whole
3.
can of beans for us, the
Yeah,
whole doing
we
it
get
on
going.
Zoom. Yeah, we could have some special guests on in here. We got plenty of people that would love to talk sports. We could talk about sports, we could talk about betting. They don't care. We'll talk about anything. So we could have some more people in. This is a good way to good change, I think. This is a good change.
All right.
But yeah, we will wrap that up there. We'll